recorded. Here we go. Okay, a message pop up to say this is being recorded. Okay. So we've got some question and answer opportunities throughout this session. So we'll kind of come to those and then open the floor for questions during those times. Please hold your questions until we open that particular segment of question and answers. We will address general questions in the Q&A. So if you've got anything really specific to your case or to your project that you don't think anyone else will benefit from, please reserve those types of inquiries to the senior officers or managers in your community neighbourhood. If you need any support during the session, let one of the facilitators know in the chat. And then please do keep muted during the presentation while others are speaking during, and also while others are speaking during the Q&A sessions as well. So the reason we're here today is that we would like you to leave with an understanding of the social model of disability, and then also explore how to make your project more inclusive and accessible, and obviously during the question and answers to make sure that we're trying to answer as best as possible all your questions, though, so that you feel confident moving forward. We'll always put this on just as a guideline, but we never stick to the times on here. So generally, we're just going to go. I'm just going to go start doing the things that should have happened by now. Honey, Sophie, and Angus will start the presentation on the main presentation on inclusivity and accessibility. Don't worry about the questions. There'll be opportunities for questions before 7 o'clock anyway. Next steps, and then the clinic ends. Again, they're real rough guidelines on the times. So things that should have taken place so far. I think everyone in this particular call have signed and returned the full grant agreement documents. You would have provided all other documents highlighted in your grant agreements. If you're using Compost, you would have signed and returned the consent form, and if you're an organisation, you would have been set up as a NUM account to receive the grants. So I think please do complete these if you haven't done so. I think I'm going to pass on to Anna now, who will just talk you through a couple of more slides.
Yes, so you might have heard already, I'm sure you have, that we've got the Our Projects events coming up in June. So they're starting at Custom House, Canning Town on the 3rd, and then the last one will be Stratford and West Ham on the 25th, and you can see all the dates here. It will be a marketplace opportunity, so residents can come in, find out what you've done so far, how they might be able to get involved, if there's any volunteering opportunities or promoting events and activities. So it's just a great way to promote your event. We're hoping to have flyers available in the next week or so to start advertising. So we're really excited for them, and to see all your projects in action.
Thanks, Anna. So you receive more information by your neighbourhood teams very soon about the event as well, and how to prepare for those.
So the theme of I've already done this, but Our Projects. So it's from thinking about our priorities, which was our first event in May, and then Our Solutions, which were June, July. We've had over 10,000 residents vote. So it's a really great way to show residents, what they voted for and them coming alive. So you'll have a table with a stand, so you can bring any flyers or promotional materials. And there'll also be 15 minutes at the end of the session for people online to come and ask any questions. But we'll send out all information soon. And one of the things we are going to be asking projects to do, so you don't need to worry about this just yet, but just to flag that this will be coming your way in the next week or so, is that we're really encouraging projects to update their new and co-create page. This is especially for people who can't make it on the day. They might want to find out what you've been up to. And we think a really engaging way to do that is through creating videos. So there are a few things to think about when creating a video. So firstly, making sure that everyone gives consent to be in it. I should put video consent rather than photo consent there. Being clear about the story that you're telling in your video. So the name, what you've done so far and what you've got coming up. So sort of a beginning, middle, and not quite an end yet, because we're not there yet. Sorry, I've got a cold and I can. We would like videos to be quite short, no longer than 3 minutes. Firstly, for you, not to have to create loads of content, but also to keep people's attention. We've figured out that the only way to put videos on You and Co-Create is to upload it to YouTube first and then link it to your page. So you would need to send it to me first and I can do that for you. And then we might use your video to promote your project via Newham Council's social media channels or newsletters. So this is just a flag to you that this is coming, and more information will be coming to you shortly. Next slide, please.
Yes. Just to add to that, I mean, I think this is just an example of how we're trying to make things accessible for our residents as well. So for those people that can't make the event physically on the day, it's just an opportunity for them to hear your story online, ideally through a video, because I think it's quite personal and quite interactive using a video as well. So there you go. Next slide. All right. That was the last slide, wasn't it? Yeah. Brilliant. So over to Annie, Sophie, and Angus. You want to stop sharing?
Thanks, Chris. I'll share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yes, we've already introduced ourselves. So I'm the resident co-chair of the co-production forum, co-chair of a local community group, and I work with Enabled Living, helping them with their co-production.
Yeah, and then just to introduce, I mean, we've introduced ourselves, myself, and Honey, but I know in the chat people wanted to know what co-production was and what the co-production team is. So co-production is basically a way of working with residents. Sorry, this cat is being very annoying. She keeps going into frame. I really apologize about that. So co-production is a way of working with residents where residents are equal partners in how we co-design and co-deliver services. So there's a co-production team, which is myself and Honey and our manager Aidan, who sit in adult social care, and we support co-production activities across a number of different projects. So Angus mentioned the co-production forum, which is made up of different community groups. We also have the the substance misuse. We've had co-production surrounding substance misuse, domestic abuse, frailty, 50 steps to a healthier Newham, all different projects covering all different areas. And it's all just about supporting residents and to come together to help us design and deliver services. Just to give you a whirlwind tour of co-production, but we will touch on that a little bit later as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and just again, I'll introduce myself. I am Honey. I work with Sophie, and as she's mentioned, our manager Aidan, and we have been delivering co-production as a service, as an idea in the council for over 10 years now. How long? I think about 12 years now. And we work very closely with Angus and a number of other residents to support the council to shape and deliver services, as Sophie has said. So I'll hand back to Angus.
Okay, so I want to mention that at the moment, one of the big issues is around transport. And we're preparing some work around that around freedom pass and blue badges and various forms of access for residents to transport issues. Let's go to the next slide then, Sophie, please.
Thanks, Angus. So it was just what we're going to cover in the session. So we're going to talk about the social model of disability next with Angus, and then we're going to introduce you to the accessibility events checklist, and we'll look into that in more detail and the kind of things you can introduce your projects to make them more accessible, and just generally reflecting on accessibility more widely. So over to Angus to talk about the social model.
Okay. Can we have the next slide then, please?
I think you might be sharing the wrong screen on PowerPoint.
No, I think that was the right presentation.
Yeah, I think that might be the
Okay, well, the social model of disability is really was created because it's a counterpoint to the medical model of disability, which looks at your impairment first and calls you disabled because I am physically disabled. I can't use stairs. I need level access to a building. And if the building isn't accessible, it creates my disability. I have an impairment, but it's society that makes me disabled by not having the access to everything. Whereas the medical model will concentrate on your impairment and go, if you can't climb stairs, what we need to do is make you able to climb stairs rather than looking at societal issues that create the barriers. So, in the social model, disability is created by society, not by your impairment. It's a different emphasis on how we treat people with impairments. If we go to the next slide, please. So this is a better explanation of it. And although a lot of the work around this is done with impaired people and looking at the barriers we encounter, it actually, in a lot of ways, applies to most people have some sort of barrier in their life. If you look around the diagram, things like discrimination in employment, poverty, especially prejudice, inaccessible environment. If you look around, actually, it applies to an awful lot of people in society. I mean, if you're visually impaired, if you've got mental health issues, if you're part of the deaf community, there are issues that affect everyone, really. I mean, mothers with children in buggies have a lot of issues about access. So although it has been created largely by impaired people, I think it applies to an awful lot of us, and those barriers. We'll go into detail later about how we overcome those barriers, but that's just an overview of the barriers that are created by society. And we are not disabled people. It is society that disables us. We merely have impairments. Shall we go on to the next slide, Sophie? So, actually, before we take questions, is there anything Sophie and Honey want to add?
I don't have anything to add, Angus, unless there's something in particular that you think that we could contribute.
No, well, I
Expanding.
think I've covered. I'll try to say that everyone here will have different groups, and you will need to apply different parts of this whole issue we're addressing. So don't be daunted by the length of the document, because it won't all be relevant to you. You will need to apply the sections that are relevant to your groups. So now we can take any questions people have so far. Oh, am I explaining everything perfectly? Obviously.
Oh,
No? Okay. We'll go on to the next slide then, Sophie, please. So, yeah, but, so just, do you want to explain this, Honey or Sophie?
Yep. So I'm happy to explain the checklist.
Okay.
So at the co-production forum and various focus groups and other areas of work that we do, started to notice increasingly we would get feedback from events about how to make them more accessible. And these were often events held within the council, outside the council, in the NHS. We just felt that there was a lot of need out there for something to kind of make accessibility more straightforward. So we co-produced this handy accessible events checklist. And the idea is that, like Angus said, it's not about ticking off every item off the checklist. You might be limited financially. It might not be suitable for the group of people that you're working with or who are attending your meetings. But the idea is just to make your events more open, more welcoming, and more appealing to people who might have different needs. So the number one thing really to consider is flexibility. So different people have different needs. One person who is deaf will need different support to another person who is deaf, for example. People use different equipment, different technology. They have their own styles and comfort levels. So as much as you can kind of support people as individuals, that's kind of the best way forward. And the residents and the people who are attending events are experts by experience. So obviously they know their own circumstances better. They understand their own needs and their needs of their community better than people who aren't in that community or don't have that impairment. So just a couple of things to bear in mind. So the checklist itself contains a number of different sections. The first section is about physical space. So that's about accessibility of venues, things like transport, parking, and general comfort levels within the physical space. The next section is about other needs. So that is considered things like emotional, spiritual, psychological needs of attendees. And generally, this is a bit of a catch-all category for those kind of additional things that just make an event more accessible and more welcoming and comfortable for people who have a kind of variety of different needs in these situations. The next section is digital events. So obviously this isn't applicable to every project, but for those who do have a digital element, there are things you could consider. They're obviously not accessible to everyone, but there are useful ways to kind of adapt your digital events to kind of support people who may want to join, who have busy schedules, caring responsibilities, or are housebound, and might find that attending a digital event is the best way to be involved in something. The next section is communication needs. That covers translators, communication cards for people who have learning disabilities or generally to support meetings, things like audio and aids for people with visual impairments. The next session is information accessibility. That's about meeting the needs of people with dyslexia, things like easy read, readers. Again, that's another support software for people with visual impairments, and kind of general pointers about making information more accessible. And then the last section is useful resources, which is just kind of different bits and pieces that we picked up along the way. Some of them you might want to access, some of them might not be the right thing for you. Again, this is all about flexibility and just kind of opening yourself up to thinking about accessibility and looking at kind of access in a kind of more broader sense. But I suppose we were going to go into breakout rooms next. I'm not sure. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. I'm just wondering, we're quite a small group of people here today. Do you still want to do breakout rooms, or would you prefer to have
Let's have
us
it in the
all
main.
together?
Yeah, let's have a chat in the main room, and plus this way we can keep the recording going so that everyone can. Because normally we pause during breakout rooms, so this way we can carry on recording and actually capture the conversations that are going on as well. So
Okay,
that's quite useful.
amazing. Yep, no, not a problem. So I suppose I think we have time to kind of touch on each of the sections in turn. Does anyone have a particular preference for one of the sections, or should I just go straight into physical space as an option?
Well, I think we should start with that anyway, because it's probably very important to setting up your event.
Bear with me just 1 second and I'll put it on the screen. Don't work with technology or animals. That's what I've realized today. Okay, let me share my screen. Does anyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm just going to scroll down to physical space. Is that big enough for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, Angus, this is kind of over to you to talk about physical space.
Yeah, because really, often when you talk to people about making this space accessible, and you go, what do you think? They'll go, wheelchair ramps, and that's all they'll say, really. So we got a lot of residents together who had different impairments and barriers and tried to get an overview of what everyone's access needs. So really, the first thing is the space, of course. So you, as well as needing level access, you need to make sure there's room for wheelchairs and people who need mobility aids or just more space in general, making sure wires and drip hazards are dealt with, of course. It's all fairly logical, but we thought we'd like to put it all in the document. So if you're creating an event, you have it all in one place. So you've got fire evacuation, your fire drills, considering access for transport. When people get there, how do they access the building? Too many times people concentrate on the building and forget about people actually getting there. So you make sure there are drop-off points for taxis. Make sure you advertise all the links, all the buses and trains, booking booking parking spaces, and giving yourself plenty of time before you set up. While you set up, it's very important, actually, especially when you're beginning that, and the more familiar you get at it, the quicker it will become. But first, you need to give yourself plenty of time to make sure you've addressed the issues you need to address. Things like being guide dog and assistance dog friendly. And a really good idea is having volunteer staff who are there to support residents and participants. If they need help, either getting refreshments, if there's a buffet system you're running, that could be a problem for some people. And identifying yourself as someone with a disability can be handy so people know who they're dealing with rather than you having to tell everyone. And the identification for volunteers and stuff so people know who to go to if they require assistance. We made the point here about acoustics because especially if people are online, a muffled sound can really affect people's cognition of what's going on and what's being said. So try and check the acoustics before the event and address any issues. Before you get to the event, because you could waste time that could be more productively spent if you do it during the event, there's a point here about seating and providing some. We said high back supported seating because often people find it difficult to sit for long periods of time. So it's nice to have alternate seating for people who require it. And I made a point earlier about having wide enough aisles for people to access all parts of the space, and accessible toilets need to be there for staff, but also you may need a radar key. That's a key that opens accessible toilets. So make sure someone on the day has access to a radar key. And just, they can be bought as well online. So if you want one, you can get one online. And it's always a good idea for someone to have access to one. So you can all access the toilet if you require it. So then just the atmosphere, heating, ventilation and lighting. So really good idea is to have a site visit. And remember though, like we keep saying, all of this is a bit dependent on your actual participants and their access needs. So some, like, we've got a thing here about dementia-friendly space. If you're working with younger people, you won't need to address it. But if you are working with people with dementia, or you have participants, it becomes vital. So it's, as Sophie said earlier, about flexibility around the actual event, what you need to address. So we made, can you move it up slightly, Sophie? So here, the last point was about timings. I mean, we recommend between 10:30 and 2:30 for people with children. They need to access the school run, but also you may find your participants would prefer an evening session if they're working during the day. So it's about tailoring your event around your audience, but also there are issues like signers that you need to be aware that some people might get sidelined if those issues aren't addressed. So really try and know your audience before the event as much as you can. Okay, I think I waffled on a lot. So are we going to go through it and have questions at the end?
I'm wondering whether we should give people an opportunity to let us know if there's something that they've considered from the list, from that section in particular, that they would take away from it, or if
Okay.
there's something that they think we've missed, even because this is a living
Yeah.
document.
Can I
And
just ask
really,
can I just ask
oh,
a question about the guide dogs and dog assistant? Is it guide dog assistants? Is that the term, right term?
guide dogs and assistant dogs.
Yeah. So it says like be friendly, like you're building to be friendly to. Does that mean just to be open to receive those types of residents with the assistant dogs, or is this anything specific that needs to be done in the building to make any sort of alterations to make that happen more easily, or what do you suggest? Is it just a notice to say, guide dogs welcome? Well, what do you recommend?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
But it's also about that flexibility and trying to know who your participants are going to be so that you can make sure that things like water for the dogs, there is somewhere they can access, somewhere to relieve themselves if they have to. Not in the accessible toilet though. Is there anything you guys would like to add there, Honey and Sophie?
I was just going to concur with you, Angus, and say I think it's just making sure that that any location that you might deliver a project in does allow animals into the building or into the premises, and if you do have outdoor space, if it's a whole day thing and the animal does need to relieve itself, that it can, it can do that. So you're not sort of, I don't know, lots of areas have outdoor spaces where obviously people can allow their dogs to release themselves responsibly. Obviously, just make sure that they do collect up and all that kind of stuff, tidy up after themselves, but not to be hostile, I suppose, towards the animals. And then consider if you're delivering a project and maybe one of the people who are delivering the project, who are supporting you, or it's a volunteer or somebody, if they are scared of dogs, people have allergies or they have fears and things like that, to consider that as well, so that you're not also putting out other people, but able to manage being inviting for people who need assistance dogs or guide dogs. So just be considerate about that. And I think one of the other things that you could potentially do, which allows people to feel invited, is to have a water bowl for the dog, if you're able to do that. Some people walk with theirs, water bowl for their dogs, but if you're delivering something in the middle of summer, it's really hot. If there's a tap locally, somewhere that you can offer the animals some water, then that would be really helpful as well. Again, it's not things that you have to do, but it's sometimes it's just going that extra mile and opening up the service to be more welcoming and inviting for people who have those needs.
Thanks, Honey. Yeah. Sorry, I was going to ask one more question. It's just about the volunteers and the staff that you use to help at the whatever it might be, the event or the workshop. What's the limitations in terms of job roles you can apply? Because I know we've had to, when we've sort of run events, for example, for the elderly, we've actually paid social care workers to come and help for certain aspects of their role, to kind of help them, assist them go to the toilet and that kind of stuff as well. So there's certain limitations, do you think, with just hiring volunteers on what kind of things they might be able to help or assist with, would you say?
Do you mean new volunteers, or do you mean when you say paying social care?
Yeah, no.
social
So
care, like carers.
that was an example that we when we did our Christmas event, we invited the elderly and we paid social care workers to come and assist the elderly residents during the event. But we also had volunteers as well, new volunteers who had a different role. So when it comes to, say, for People Power Places projects, and say they're running events in the parks or in a building, and they recruit volunteers to help at these events, would you say there needs to be quite a well-defined job role for them, and what are the limitations that they shouldn't really try to go beyond in terms of helping residents?
That's a really good question, probably for our volunteers team. But I believe that what they would potentially say, this from experience working with volunteers a lot and having these conversations with the volunteers team, is that volunteers shouldn't be asked to do anything that a paid member of staff or a paid officer, should be doing. If it's a paid role, so for example, taking somebody to the toilet, for example, isn't really something that a volunteer should be doing. If you are able to cover that by paying somebody to do that, because you've got to think about all the aspects of things like health and safety, and whether that person has a DBS check. You've got to think about the vulnerability of the person that you're supporting, and if you're paying for a service, then a lot of these things should be covered under that contract. It's also really good to ask the individual if they have a support worker, that they themselves have a support worker that can come with them, that would support them with those kind of things. But if you have a volunteer, for example, from an organisation or a team like New and Volunteers team, they shouldn't be asked to do something that should be done by somebody who is being paid. So the job description needs to be different, and the what the volunteer brings, or what should be able to get from that is a value experience, and not something that you would consider, I don't like to use a term, but I did say the other day that they're not dog's bodies. They're there to add value to your project or to your event on that day, and the job descriptions need to be clearly defined. So if you do have both roles present, a paid role and a voluntary role, they should be quite different.
Thanks. Yeah, because I think a lot of projects will have not necessarily through new volunteers, but they may have other people assisting them in projects as well. So
yeah, definitely. What you don't want is a volunteer to have a conversation with somebody who's there and they're getting paid, and one is getting paid and one isn't, and they're doing the same role. So I think just some clarity there, and you will have volunteers who go above and beyond, and they're exceptional, and they really want to do go the extra mile, and that's great. And I think that if you do find yourself in that situation, at least what you want to do is to make sure that when you recruited that individual, they were very clear of what their what the where the line is drawn, and if they choose to go above and beyond, then that's fine. But always consider the sort of legal situations you could put yourself in if you are asking a volunteer who has not been DBS checked or so on to support someone to manage their personal hygiene or anything like that.
Yeah, thanks. That's it for me.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry, excuse me. Thanks, Chris. Does anyone have any thoughts on that particular section? Something you might want to introduce your own project, or a question you might have? If not, we can move on to another section. But James, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say it's very helpful your perspective on things. I was just thinking about we have our own building that the events happen in, and there are ongoing issues around accessibility and sort of ranges of people. And I was just thinking that I've never seen anyone come into the building with a guide dog. We haven't really talked about that. It's very interesting to think about it, but we definitely probably have an advantage in that we are able to look at those issues, and we incorporate accessibility into our building, and we have like new building work. It's good to be reminded of it. I suppose that's what I'm saying, Angus. I thought you did that very well.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And just, I know we're gonna keep saying this, when you guys come to running your events, what we really value is feedback from you guys who've actually done it. So we're really open to developing this strategy in the future. So the more feedback we get, hopefully, the better the document will become.
Sure. I guess it raises issues for smaller organizations that might be funded by people powered places, because a lot of the things in my experience that you've been talking about, they have like resource implications, and I think it might be a different story from smaller organizations. We're quite a well-established organization, but I know that this people powered places includes a range of local organizations. So I'm not sure it's just like one story fits all. Yeah.
Right, yes. I mean, that was what Sophie was saying about flexibility. And there are certain issues that are not going to be so relevant to an organization. So it's, as we keep saying, it's a living document, and we want feedback, all sorts of different groups, about how effective they find this. So thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Thanks, James. Should I move on to the next section then, which I believe is my section, which is about information accessibility? So if you bear with me a second, I'll wave my magic wand and make it appear on the screen, hopefully. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
So information accessibility is about information being available to people that is clear and free from jargon and acronym, and mostly in plain English. When we overcomplicate things, we exclude lots of people who may speak English as a second language, who may have dyslexia, for example, a learning disability. And actually, it's just not the best way to communicate, especially when you're working in the community. We've got pulled together kind of a list of helpful tips when it comes to information accessibility. So have very clear text. So that means a high contrast between the text and the background. So you can see black and white, there's a high contrast, not putting a dark blue on a light blue, things like that. Using large print where possible. So Arial size 14 is a good standard. This document is an Arial size 14. And larger if necessary, depending on the audience. In terms of dyslexia, people may need different coloured backgrounds to support with their understanding. So we have residents who have dyslexia needs where yellow, for example, background supports them with their understanding of the text. you can get these acetates which you lay over paper, and they come in a range of different colors because different people respond better to different colors. So we had yellow, we also had green. So it really depends. And again, that's about having that customizable approach when it comes to accessibility. Translation is another key one. If you want to work with different people in the community, then kind of looking at translation can be a really good way of engaging them. Obviously, we're aware that translation can be quite expensive, but for smaller community groups, we might be able to work with kind of local volunteers to translate materials, kind of team up with different community groups that support different community groups, and kind of work together to kind of make sure that information is getting out about your project, and that there's people on hand who speak a variety of different languages, just to encourage more people to be involved. Easy read is another one that is a specific kind of text, so a combination of text and pictures, which is used to support people with learning disabilities to understand information. You do get trained to write in easy read. It's not as straightforward as it might seem, and there are different resources out there. You might be able to get some support from Enabled Living, or you perhaps there's somebody in the community who might be able to help with this. If not, there's a website called Easy on the Eye, which has different pictures, and you can kind of look at some of the general rules when it comes to easy read, pull together something, because easier read is good if you're not able to put something together that's easy read. Readers is another key thing to consider. Again, this is digital, so it might not apply to everyone here, but different documents are read out loud using different software, such as screen readers. So it really depends. There are lots of different software out there, and people have different, they need information in different formats. So for example, one of our residents can only use her screen reader for like Word document text, but not PDF. So if it's on a PDF, she won't be able to read it. If it's on a Word document, it will be able to be read to her. Other people have technology where they kind of put their finger to the screen and it reads what their finger is on. So if the document is in one column, so the text is all in one row, or two columns where text is separate, so all down this side and then down the next side, that will determine how he's able to understand the text. So just kind of knowing your audience and what it is that they need to support them, and just kind of, a lot of these things are quite easy to tweak to make them customizable for the people that are receiving them. We put a section on PowerPoints on there just because it comes up time and time again. It might not be relevant to you, but it's probably worth mentioning things like avoiding unnecessary amounts of text and information, putting diagrams on the screen that's spaced out and in large font. The slide should be used as mostly as a prompt, so shouldn't be relied upon for information. So if somebody's blind or has a visual impairment and they're dialing into a meeting and somebody says, oh, you know, as you can see on the screen, and and kind of moves on, they've lost all of that information. So just to avoid putting vast amounts of information on a slide and referring to it mostly verbally. And then general pointers, we feel that you should avoid jargon, as I mentioned earlier, acronyms, technical language. So kind of the best 3 words are plain, simple English, and that usually works best all around. So thank you very much. Has anyone got any thoughts about how they might make information more accessible on their projects, or perhaps some reflections on what has been presented?
Can I just add, Sophie, that that issue about accessible presentations, I mean, it comes up time and time again. And the main thing is, when you have an outside presenter who comes in and delivers some presentation, that it is made crystal clear to them about how their presentation needs to be totally accessible. I mean, we've been training for 10 years about that. And it still happens all the time. So it's about reiterating that to every presenter, I think, as and when, because otherwise you get these presentations with so much information on them that no one can read it. Okay, sorry, that's my rant about that. Over.
No, I fully appreciate that, Angus, spreading the good word.
Can I just say, I don't suppose many people are using PowerPoint, but a general rule that I've always worked with is 661, which is no more than 6 ideas on a page, no more than 6 words to any sentence, and 1 idea to each sentence. I think it's something maybe the council could take on, because the PowerPoints we get are absolutely overloaded with
Yes. Yeah, but I think we should make a note of that and take it on board.
Can you repeat that? So 6 bullet points a page.
Yeah. No more than 6 words.
No,
6
6
words
words a sentence.
1 idea in each sentence. Now, it does depend. I mean, something like this, if you haven't, there's often a need for more information than the thing that the presenter has said. I mean, that can appear in notes. I don't know if you can actually send the note. Yes, you probably can send, because the notes page, isn't there? The additional information could be in the notes, not on the slide.
Thanks for that. That's really useful. You've got me thinking about easy read versions and sort of maybe easy read versions on Co-Create, or how we talk about people power places. That's a really good prompt. Thank you.
I have a document I'm happy to share with Chris and Anna to share with you all, just some simple tips on how to create easy read documents. So I'm happy to share that as somewhere to start.
Can I also say that I wasn't aware of this, but somebody was telling me the other day, really, we don't need to use Language Shop anymore, because if you've got a smartphone, you can get it anything translated. You just need it in one language, clearly written, and then but anybody with a smartphone can translate it into their own language. Save some time and money.
Yeah, I think that's worth making a note of as well, and including in the document. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think probably what we're going to get from, I hope what we get from this and from the people listening on video as well, is that there are probably some really cheap or low cost workarounds to some of this, or like adaptations that we could really learn from. I think community groups are really innovative when it comes to doing things that way. So, any kind of tips or tricks you have, please do share with us. We're always keen to learn. And that's how the document started, as a kind of pulling together of ideas. So that's like an ongoing process.
Yes, and one thing we did reflect on that was we need more input from people working with younger people, a specific access need they might prefer, because we, bless us, mainly work with an older group when we created this. So we are looking for any input from people working with different groups, because we want to keep updating that so it becomes relevant to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Angus. Should we move on to the next section about communication accessibility? Honey's Wi-Fi is a bit ropey, so I think we're going to try, and then if not, I can always step in, or Angus can step in.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I do apologise. My internet's always a little bit unstable at certain times of the day. So I'll kick off. Please let me know at any point, just wave or something if you start to lose me. Sophie will take over.
Have we lost her already? Yes, I think so. Oh dear. Okay. Should I go through this section then? And hopefully Honey can join us in a sec. So communication is kind of the other branch of information, I suppose. So in terms of accessible communication, it's all about ensuring people can meaningfully participate. So things like translators, we kind of spoke about this earlier, didn't we? And having community translators available. I know some great community groups that deliver their sessions in English, and then things like Gujarati or Urdu. So they'll do it kind of interwoven throughout the day, which is quite nice. British Sign Language is another one. And there are lots of different support that needs to be put in place for British Sign Language interpreters to interpret at an event. So if it's a longer event, having kind of longer than an hour, really, having 2 interpreters is usually required. This kind of gives them time to have breaks and alternate. And then there are different adaptations you can make to the meeting itself. So when British Sign Language interpreters are working, it's really difficult if people are cutting across each other, because obviously you have to say who's speaking, and then you have to say what they're saying, and then you would have to then switch to a new person. So just having really strict rules when it comes to one person speaking at a time, kind of making sure that deaf and hard of hearing residents who are using the interpreters also have an opportunity to contribute, because if you're focusing on understanding the interpretation, maybe there needs to be a bit more effort to kind of check in with them. Is there anything you want to say? That kind of thing. Just because they're kind of working doubly hard as there sometimes. People that can hear, that is. Another useful thing that we have is communication cards. So we have this as a general thing for the forum, where one side is a red side and it says I don't understand, and the other side is a green side and this is I want to say something. So this kind of helps when you're holding a meeting and there might be questions and answers, because an I don't understand means that something needs to be clarified about what has been said, but I want to say something. It could be a whole new subject. It could be a whole different focus area. So it just kind of helps people express what they want to communicate in advance of kind of the chair or the person leading the meeting choosing who's going to go next. And it's quite a good way doing that. And then the Learning Disability Resident Advisory Group also developed kind of a more simple card with just yes and no. And both of these designed at the bottom of the page, and we can send you the kind of document, and so you can just have them printed from that document. Because if you take it from the checklist, it will probably come out blurry. So other things that we've used are communication badges for people with learning disability and autism. So that expresses to other people how they want people to communicate with them. So it will say things like, I can manage interactions that do not need help at this moment, or only speak to me if I have already given you permission. Some people might not want anyone to come up to them if there's like a networking or a lunch or something kind of quite open. Other people will kind of feel comfortable someone coming up and would encourage them to make an effort to make conversation. So that's something very specific, again, to a certain community, but can be quite good just to make everyone feel comfortable. Another kind of general pointer in terms of working with blind and visual impairment, people with blind and visual impairment, is for when somebody is speaking, they should introduce themselves. Even if they have already spoken, it just kind of helps give the person listening who's not able to see kind of know who's speaking, and they say, oh, they talked earlier about something different. They can kind of piece together what it is that person is trying to put across. Obviously, if you know that person, you won't need to do that probably because they'll recognize your voice. But at a meeting where everyone's meeting each other for the first time, it's especially important. And then the last point on that list is just audio systems. This is a big barrier. I myself have a hearing impairment. I wear hearing aids, and there are so many things I've missed out on life from bad audio systems, not being able to hear the sound being echoey, there perhaps being no audio system when there really should be, or if you're coming in late, having to sit at the back. And then not being audio means that you're not going to hear what's happening at the front. So it just kind of excludes people, I suppose. So that's just kind of a general whiz through communication needs. Angus, did you want to come in with anything?
Yeah, but I just think, is it possible to show us the communication pods at this point?
Yeah.
They are so useful. I mean, having chaired a number of meetings, if you're trying to run a meeting, it is so handy to know who wants to speak and know what order they actually express their need. So, could we have a look now, Sophie? While you've actually just mentioned it, right at the bottom, look. These cards, if you have them on every table, so every person has a set. So you know exactly who wants to speak and what order they express themselves in. So, thank you, Sophie.
That's
I
okay.
wanted to say that because I found that such a useful resource, actually.
Yeah, and then this is the ones that have been recently developed by the Learning Disability RAG. So it's a bit more simple, and it can be used as well for like voting as well because it's got yes and no. So yeah, there's lots of different versions out there, but like Angus says, we do use them quite a lot.
And also the point about testing audio goes hand in hand really with what we said about acoustics as well, making sure it can be, everything can be heard properly. Thank you.
Thanks, Angus. Is there anything that anyone wants to contribute at this point? Something you might have reflected on in the last section, or any questions?
You've been perfect, Sophie.
Yeah, perfectly explained everything. Great news. And Honey's back. She's returned. That's wonderful. We've just rounded up the communication section, Honey. Wonder if she could hear us.
So I guess if you're talking to me.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, she's gone again. Never mind. So I guess what we wanted to do now is at this point we would return to the main room, but I think it would be good just to kind of have an opportunity to reflect on main takeaways. So perhaps we can kind of go around the room, and I'll just kind of ask you if there's like one specific thing that you would want to introduce to your project, or perhaps something that's missing. James, can I go to you first?
Yeah, I think there was a point made about, well, there have been lots of points made, which has been very helpful. But there was a point made about younger people. And we have, we've not really introduced ourselves, have we? I work at your place, which used to be Anchor House on Barking Road. So
Okay.
we have like 115 bed spaces, and we have a significant group of younger residents who are experiencing homelessness, but are also like holding asylum seeker or refugee status. And automatically there are language issues there. And it's just kind of like reinforced that really a conversation about accessing and providing information in different formats. So that would be my main takeaway from it. So I was interested to hear what you're saying about needing to listen more to younger residents as well, because that's certainly part of our story. I think in terms of like the wider conversation about inclusivity, I think it's probably true to say that we do reflect, sadly, the wider society of Newham, in that like I think 65% of our residents identify as members of ethnic minority groups. So we think we're doing something right, really, but then there are always things to add on, aren't there? And I mentioned resource implications, but that's what I'll take away really. And I'll be focused on the particular event, which I think is the 3rd of June, isn't it? Yeah, so that's where we are. It's also about celebrating your successes as well, isn't it? In terms of like what you're doing, it's like there's always room for improvement, but very useful. It's very useful what you said.
Can I just
So,
add about the language barriers? I mean, I think technology is evolving really quickly now as well, especially with the evolution of AI as well. I mean, there's already tools out there where you get live translation. So when someone speaks one language, you've got an earpiece through your phone, and it automatically translates into a different languages live in front of you. So there's that I mean that's already existent now, but with the introduction of AI tools as well, I think that's just going to get more accessible to everyone as well. So yeah, watch this space. I mean things might be coming out very soon where it will make accessibility a lot easier in terms of language barriers. But
I do worry that eventually we won't need to speak to each other.
yeah, well, yeah, I've seen some things about implantation into your brain, and ultimately, yeah, we won't go down that route. So, yeah,
And also, James, when, well, I said we were reflecting on Bruce, we needed to communicate with more. So you sound like the perfect candidate we
I knew,
need to share with.
I knew there'd be a price to pay for this conversation. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest with you, a lot of our residents experiencing homelessness, we can't get them to engage. They're so like
Okay.
traumatized and sort of
Yes,
off the radar that we have to like really target them around resident engagement. And happy to speak to you outside of this, Angus, if you'd like me to provide you with my
definitely.
email
Yeah.
detail. Yeah. Shall I put it in the chats?
Yes, if you would.
I will.
thank you. Does anyone want to share any main takeaways from the session today? Custom House Bookshop is looking very reflective. If I could pick on you, perhaps. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Hi, I'm Denise.
Denise. Hi, Denise.
So we are, well, it's myself and another member who are founders of the Custom House Community Bookshop. And basically we are accessible to everyone because we're a small business. We're on our high street, which is quite accessible by car, bus, train. Um, and I think for me, it's just seeing other ways that we can be more accessible than what we already are. I think there's some things that are against us because we don't, our toilet space is not it's not big enough and accessible for wheelchair users. And we can't change that. But it's just knowing that there might be other areas that we have to look up. So I was quite interested in the readers because we are a bookshop, and making it accessible for all readers is one of our big main thing. So I'm going to look into how we can uh, have readers in the bookshop, because we do have space where people can just come in and read. They don't necessarily have to buy a book, but the space is available if you just want to come in and read, or if you want help with reading, which is what we do quite a lot. So I'm going to be looking into that.
Thanks, Denise.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, audiobooks are just incredible for that kind of thing, aren't they? A lot of our
Yeah.
deaf residents we work with use audiobooks in lots of different formats. And there's even a newer talking newspaper which gets sent to your house, and you put it into a device and turn into your kind of home device and turn it on. I can't remember if it's a cassette or a CD. I think it might be a CD, because I remember speaking to somebody who doesn't have anything to play it on, because obviously nothing comes with a CD player anymore. Laptops don't come with a CD player. You'd have to buy a special CD player to play the newspaper. So as technology evolves, it does leave people behind, but does open up new opportunities at the same time. So it's a tricky one, but I think just having variety, variety is the spice of life, and that's kind of what's important here.
And also, am I on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Also, great audio resources, the RNOB stuff. They have some wonderful stuff on audio. I use it a lot, actually, for my bedtime reading. I just play an RNIB tape.
What does RNIB stand for?
Oh,
Angus?
sorry. Royal Institute for the Blind. Have
National?
they changed their name now, actually? They still the RNIB, Royal National Institute for the Blind. I think they may have a different name now. I'm just old.
Right, Sophie, I think we need to start wrapping up now. Is there anything else that you need to finish with the presentation?
Yeah, I suppose the kind of ending note from us, I'm sure Angus will want to say something as well. It's just and this is coming from a co-production point of view, is that it's really about listening to the residents you're working with them to come up with solutions. So they're the experts of their own lives. And if something's not possible now, if you're not able to put something in place when you do your evaluation, if you're able to work very closely with your residents on evaluating your project, what would they suggest when it comes to accessibility? What would have made that possible? What would have made that event more comfortable and enjoyable for them? So if it's not something you can put in place now, it's about working with residents to kind of make sure that it's something we can consider for the future. Angus, did you have any closing remarks?
Just really about what we said right at the start about flexibility. And we are always trying to identify how things can be improved. So really, we just want as much feedback about this stuff as we can get, because we always want to be working with people to make everything more accessible. Otherwise, we all disappear into our silos again. And we actually want the whole object of this project is to try and pull people together. And we would like to become a part of that rather than part of the problem. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Angus.
you. Thanks, Angus. Brilliant. So, just going to continue with the final parts of the slides. Thank you to Honey, Sophie, and Angus. Just to remind everyone that we will continue our program of support clinics, project clinics. So we've got one in May lined up, called Environment, Sustainability and Limiting Project Carbon Footprint. We haven't set a date just yet. We're just waiting for colleagues in the council who are the experts on this field to get back to us with a date. So we will let you know as soon as we can about that particular date. And then the one following after that will be in July, which will be about evaluation, monitoring and learning. So if I go to next steps, so again, if you've got any further questions, contact your neighbourhood senior officer or manager. We will have the event in June, like Anna explained earlier on. And good luck with your project. As always, we will send out the slides, and also I think Sophie has going to provide us the material that they used today for the presentation as well, along with the checklist as well. Is that right, Sophie?
Yeah, checklist, PowerPoint, and Honey also mentioned kind of a guide to easy read or tips to creating easy read, so we can send that out as well.
Oh, brilliant. That's great. So yeah, keep an eye out for that over the next coming days. We'll just need to convert this recording into a YouTube link. Once we do that, then we will send all the materials out in one go to all 120 projects. I'm just going to pass it on to Anna for the last words.
Yeah, very quickly, I need to take on board the 661 for this. But you would have received an email from me about evaluating your project. We are evaluating in two ways. So one is a baseline survey and one is as a case study. The deadline for both is Friday the 3rd of May. So it'll be great if you could either respond to the survey or the case study in the different ways you can respond. And if you have any questions or want to get in touch with me, my contact details there.
Thank you. And that's it. So yeah, there will be a feedback link as well. So when I send out the material over the next couple of days, hopefully tomorrow, but over the next couple of days, we will send a feedback to the 5 of you. I think it's five attendees today, just a feedback on today's session. And that is it. I will stop sharing now, and it's 7:32. So thank you for staying on the extra couple of minutes. I just want to say thanks to Sophie, Angus, and Honey. You're still trying to probably struggle getting on, but thank you very much for attending. That's really useful, I think, and hopefully everyone here has found that very useful too. So enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you very much. Good night.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Good
very
night,
much.
all.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.